All right, I want to roll out the next video here, teaching a principle that I think is important. And what we're going to be talking about, especially this time, is the application of the principle concept that I taught in the last couple of videos, that and the ITAR thing. So let me just do that by teaching with a couple of story type examples here. First, since we're dealing particularly right now on this website with the financial fitness problems, let me talk with one that deals with our finances, and then I'll also throw in another one that has to do with another area of our lives, just so we can get the concept here. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about from a financial aspect is if we get taught something over and over, our tendency as human beings is to believe it. And one of the things that happens right now in our financial world in particular, let's look at the concept of your mortgage to start with. Now we've gotten to a point in our country and probably all over the world right now where the concept of having a 30-year mortgage to purchase a home is normal. And if you would ask most people, do they have an option outside of that? Their answer, I can't even live in a home. It's either rent or I have to have a mortgage. And that's what we've been led to believe in our lives. It's not that that has to be true. But here's a couple of the principle-based things with a mortgage that we need to think about. Now, first of all, I'm not telling you that a mortgage is totally bad. I'm telling you when we understand the principles behind what's happening there, we will see it differently and treat it differently. Therefore, we'll get different results. So here's a couple things to think about with a mortgage. And you're going to learn this through the financial fitness program as we go through those 47 principles. Well, one of the biggest things that just shocked me when I understood it was the concept that, do you know where the money comes from that the bank loans you for your mortgage? Most of us don't. We think, well, the bank's got deposits all over the country and they just loan me some of that deposited money, but that's not true. What they do is they take advantage of something that the government has created called fractional reserve banking, where they literally create at least 90% of the money that they loan you out of thin air. It doesn't exist. That money doesn't exist until you sign that mortgage. And then you become their asset. And you've probably heard us talk about that a lot. Then here's the crazy thing. What do you pay that mortgage back with? So the money that they created out of thin air with a keystroke on a pad, what do you pay it back with? You pay it back with real money that you went out and spent 30 years of your life working hard every day so that you could earn real solid dollars to pay that mortgage back. Now, I'm not telling you fair, unfair, that's the way it should be, shouldn't be. I'm telling you that's the principle that's operating behind mortgages right now. And when you start put that now into your thinking equation, you go, wait a minute, that's not fair. There's got to be something I can do about that. Well, there is, and you'll learn more about that. Here's another big principle-based issue with a mortgage that we should all think about, and that is this. Most of us go out when we're looking for a home and we shop. We want to get the home that's most like what we want, and we want to get it for the best price that we can get. And we may go out and spend a month or two shopping for homes, and let's just take a round number here. Let's say I look around and I found a home that was $200,000 instead of $210,000 to get what I want. And we bargain back and forth and try to get the seller to go lower and everything. But when we finally buy that home and then we go out and put a 30-year mortgage on it, all of a sudden, if you do the math on a mortgage, you will literally pay somewhere from 2 to 3 times the amount that the purchase price of your house was over the course of servicing that mortgage. And all of that extra money, over and above the cost that you paid for the house, all of that is profit that goes in the banker's pocket, just because you didn't understand or you were led to believe that that's the only way that you can buy a house today. So you think about that. Is it worth buying a $200,000 house and over the course of the next 30 years paying $400,000 to $600,000 actually for it? You got to ask yourself that and put that into your thinking process. So I'll give you one more piece of that here to wrap up with. Coming from the construction business, the very last home that I built, we did a spec home, which means we go out and borrowed the money and built the home with the intent to sell it then when we were done. And when we got this home on the market, finally, I'm working with the guy that loaned me the money, and we've got a real estate agent. We find a buyer who offers us, because of their situation, that they wanted us to carry the mortgage for them for 5 years at a basic interest rate that wouldn't pay off any of the principal of the mortgage. So they were only going to be paying the interest for 5 years, and then they would go out and refinance it, get a conventional loan, and be able to go the normal route with it. Well, first of all, I thought, well, okay, that works out okay for them. And the guy who had loaned me the money to build the house looked at it and says, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Well, I got curious one day, so I pulled out what's called an amortization book that I have that lays out what the payments are on something. And I calculated that in those 5 years, those guys were going to pay to the guy who loaned them the money. They had a $320,000 house, and they were going to pay him in 5 years $95,000 of interest and not pay a dime off on that house. They were paying $95,000 just for the privilege of getting him to carry that paper. And I was dumbfounded. But as I went to do more research and calculating there, I realized that that's what happens to most of us on the first 5 years of our mortgage anyway. Because when you understand how mortgages are put together, there's very little of your principal that's paid off in the first several years of a mortgage. It's almost all interest, and it starts to gradually pivot and become more and more principal. But you just imagine if you got a $320,000 house, you've got it on a 30-year mortgage, and let's be kind to ourselves here. Let's say you still paid $80,000 in that first 5 years. $80,000 that you just gave away to the bank, and you maybe paid down $10,000 off the total value of it. And I'm not making these numbers up. You can go research this on the internet and everything, and you'll find what I'm talking about here is important. And it's these kind of principles that we need to get into our thinking process so that we don't be the suckers, if you want to call it that, who are out there working our fannies off to get real hard money to pay that much of it to the bank for no real benefit to ourselves other than that we're living indoors, which we could have done for rent anyway. Anyway, something to think about there. So that's financial principle for you. That many of us, we need to get that stuff right or we get hurt by it. Remember the ITAR thing, the results that we end up with are not what we really would have wanted had we known better information. You know what? I'm just going to leave it at that. This video is dragging out a little longer, and I don't want to belabor the point by going on into something else. I'll put the other story on another video someplace. But that's a case where not understanding principles and their concept of if you do this, this is what happens, hurts us. And by simply going out there and saying, I don't like this result, so I'm going to back up through those processes there so that I can start doing this differently. I get better information that leads to better thinking processes so I can take better actions so that I get a result that I want. That's what this is all about. And simply learning principles in that case I just told you could have changed the outcome result in that. So take that, think about it, ponder it, and I'll bet that it'll learn something and it'll impact the way you live your life.